The sound of crackling flames echoed through the dense forest, a chilling symphony of destruction that swallowed every rustle of leaves and bird call. Sarah tightened her grip on the leash in her trembling hand, her heart racing faster than her legs had carried her earlier. Around her feet, 3 tiny puppies whimpered, their wide, innocent eyes reflecting the glow of the encroaching fire. She had never been this scared before, not for herself, but for the fragile lives she now had to protect at all costs. It had started as a quiet morning walk with her rescue dog, Bella, and her recently born pups. Sarah had hoped the fresh air would soothe her worries. The forest had always been her sanctuary, a place where life felt simpler, even peaceful. But today, nature had turned against her. A sudden gust of smoke and ash in the air shattered the calm, and within moments, the world around her became an inferno. The fire moved fast, faster than Sarah could have imagined. With every step, she felt the oppressive heat closing in, threatening to snatch the air from her lungs. Her phone, now deep in her pocket, was useless. There was no signal in this isolated stretch of woods. She'd already tried calling for help, but nothing went through. All she had was her determination and the 3 little lives counting on her to guide them to safety. Sarah crouched low, pressing her palm gently against Bella's side. The loyal dog, panting heavily, nudged one of the puppies closer to Sarah as if to say, "We'll do this together." Her connection with Bella ran deep. This wasn't the first time the dog had shown extraordinary bravery. But the puppies? They were barely a few weeks old, too young to comprehend the danger they were in. Sarah's mind raced, calculating every risk, every step, as she scanned the smoky horizon for any sign of an escape route. Her instincts screamed at her to run, to flee as fast as her legs would allow. But the puppies couldn't move as quickly. Their tiny legs were no match for the rapidly advancing fire line. The thought of leaving them behind wasn't even an option. She would find a way, there had to be one. Through the haze, she spotted a narrow path winding downhill. It wasn't much, but it was her only shot. Grabbing a fallen branch, she wrapped her jacket around it, trying to fan the smoke away from the puppies as she moved forward. Each step felt like an eternity, the heat licking at her heels as she carried one puppy at a time closer to safety. Suddenly, a deafening crack echoed through the forest. A massive tree, weakened by the flames, began to topple. Sarah froze, her pulse pounding in her ears as the fiery giant leaned dangerously toward her and her little group. Would she make it in time? Would her desperate efforts to save Bella and the puppies be enough? Or would the fire claim them all before she could find a way out? The tree creaked louder, its fiery branches reaching for the sky like desperate hands clawing at the air. Sarah didn't hesitate. She scooped up the smallest puppy, tucking it close to her chest, and motioned for Bella to follow as she darted toward the narrow path. The crash behind her was deafening, sending a spray of sparks and debris flying in every direction. For a moment, she stumbled, shielding the puppy with her arms as she tried to keep her footing on the uneven ground. The forest had become a maze of smoke and fire, each turn presenting a new obstacle. Sarah's lungs burned with every breath, and her vision blurred from the tears that streamed down her face, both from the smoke and the overwhelming fear. The puppies huddled closer to her, their tiny bodies trembling against her legs. Bella barked sharply, her eyes darting toward a faint clearing ahead, as if urging Sarah to keep moving. As they pressed forward, Sarah's mind flashed back to the first time she had met Bella. It was 2 years ago, on another quiet walk in these very woods. Bella had been abandoned, skinny and scared, hiding beneath a fallen tree. Sarah had spent hours earning her trust, offering bits of food and soft words until Bella finally let her help. From that moment on, they had been inseparable. Bella had repaid Sarah's kindness 100 times over with loyalty, protection, and now, with the strength to keep going even when everything felt impossible. But today was different. The stakes had never been this high. Sarah couldn't help but think about what had caused the fire. Had it been a careless camper? A stray lightning strike? The how didn't matter as much as the now, she had to focus on surviving. Still, the thought nagged at her. Fires didn't just start out of nowhere, and the sheer speed with which this one spread seemed unnatural. The path twisted sharply, forcing Sarah to navigate around fallen logs and thick roots. The heat was relentless, and she could feel her energy draining with every step. She paused for a moment to catch her breath, setting the smallest puppy down beside its siblings. Bella stayed close, her nose to the ground, sniffing for danger, or perhaps a way out. Sarah looked around, trying to make sense of her surroundings. The clearing Bella had spotted earlier was closer now, but it wasn't an open meadow as Sarah had hoped. It was a dried-up creek bed, littered with rocks and brittle plants that crunched underfoot. The fire hadn't reached it yet, but the smoke still hung heavy in the air. She knelt down, cupping her hands around the puppies to keep them calm. She was about to pick them up again when Bella stiffened, her ears perking up. A low growl rumbled in her chest, and Sarah froze. What was it? Another falling tree? An animal fleeing the fire? The forest had gone eerily quiet except for the distant roar of the flames. The silence made her uneasy. Then she heard it, a faint but distinct sound, like a voice. It was impossible to tell where it was coming from or what it was saying, but it was there. For a moment, hope flickered in Sarah's chest. Was someone else out here? A firefighter? Another hiker? She strained her ears, trying to pinpoint the direction, but the voice was swallowed by the crackling of burning wood. Bella barked again, this time louder, as if to warn Sarah of something she couldn't see. Sarah's grip tightened on the puppy's leash. She didn't know what lay ahead, but turning back wasn't an option. The only way out was forward, into the unknown. The air grew thicker, the smoke pressing down on them like an invisible weight. Sarah's legs felt like they were moving through quicksand, every step harder than the last. The puppies whimpered softly, their tiny cries breaking Sarah's heart. She wanted to comfort them, to tell them it would all be okay, but the truth was she didn't know if it would. As she pushed through the creek bed, the faint voice returned, this time closer. It sent a chill down her spine, not from fear but from uncertainty. She couldn't tell if it was help or danger waiting for her in the haze ahead. Bella growled again, her fur bristling as she stepped protectively in front of the puppies. Whatever was out there, they were about to face it together. The voice grew louder, cutting through the thick wall of smoke like a thread of hope, or a trap. Sarah's pulse quickened as she strained to listen, her mind racing with possibilities. Could it be a firefighter? A ranger? Maybe someone else lost in this chaos, as desperate to escape as she was. But Bella's stance told a different story. The dog's body was rigid, her growls low and steady. Bella didn't trust the sound, and that made Sarah hesitate. She tightened her grip on the leash, glancing back at the puppies huddled at her feet. Their tiny faces, full of innocence, tugged at her heart. If the voice was help, it could save them. If it wasn't, she couldn't think about that now. Every decision felt like a gamble, and the stakes were too high to misstep. Hello? Sarah called out, her voice shaky and hoarse from the smoke. She waited, holding her breath as the forest answered with silence. Just as she was about to move, the voice returned, clearer this time. It was calling for help. A man's voice, rough but distinct, echoed through the trees. Is anyone there? Please. Against her better judgment, Sarah moved toward the sound, Bella reluctantly following, her growls never ceasing. The narrow creek bed twisted and turned, each bend revealing more devastation. Charred trees leaned dangerously, their blackened trunks standing like ghostly sentinels. Sarah's eyes darted around, searching for movement, for anything that could explain the voice. Then she saw him. A figure emerged from the smoke, stumbling toward her. He was tall, his clothes streaked with soot and ash. His face was smeared with dirt, and he clutched his arm as though injured. He stopped when he saw her, his wide eyes darting to Bella and the puppies. "You're real," he said, his voice cracking with relief. I thought I was alone out here." Sarah didn't lower her guard. Something about his appearance didn't sit right. His clothes weren't the kind a hiker would wear, too clean, too formal. And despite his apparent injury, he moved with surprising ease. "Are you hurt?" she asked, keeping her distance. Bella stepped closer to Sarah, her growls growing louder. "It's my arm," the man replied, holding it up as if to prove his point. "A tree branch hit me when I was trying to get away from the fire. Please, I need help." Sarah glanced at his arm. The fabric of his sleeve was torn, but there was no blood, no visible injury. Her instincts screamed at her to turn around, to run, but she was trapped. Behind her was the fire, ahead was the man. "Do you know a way out?" she asked, her voice steady despite the panic rising in her chest. He hesitated, his eyes flickering to the puppies. "There's a clearing not far from here," he said. "It leads to a road. I can show you." Sarah didn't move. Every part of her wanted to believe him, but something didn't add up. Bella's growls hadn't stopped, and Sarah had learned long ago to trust her dog's instincts. She stepped back, keeping the puppies close. "Why are you out here?" she asked, her tone sharp. The man's expression changed, just for a moment, before he masked it with a nervous smile. "I was hiking," he said quickly. "Got caught in the fire. Same as you." But Sarah knew these woods well. This part of the forest wasn't a popular trail, and hikers rarely ventured here, especially alone. She didn't have time to question him further. A loud crack echoed nearby, and Sarah whipped around to see another tree falling, its flaming branches sending embers cascading through the air. The man moved closer, his outstretched hand pointing toward the supposed clearing. "We don't have time to argue," he said urgently. Sarah hesitated, her mind racing. The smoke was thicker now, the fire growing louder. She couldn't stay here, but every fiber of her being told her not to trust this man. Bella barked sharply, stepping in front of Sarah and the puppies, her teeth bared. The man's eyes darkened, and his smile faltered. "You don't have a choice," he said quietly, his tone shifting. Sarah felt her stomach drop. This wasn't just about escaping the fire anymore. She had walked into something far more dangerous, and the real threat might not be the flames. The air felt heavier, almost suffocating, as Sarah took a step back, pulling the puppies closer. Bella remained firmly in front, her growls louder, more insistent. The man's sudden shift in demeanor sent a chill down her spine, cutting through the heat of the fire. His words lingered in the air, and Sarah couldn't shake the feeling that whatever was about to happen, it wasn't going to end well. She glanced around desperately, searching for an escape route. The flames behind her were advancing, licking at the edges of the creek bed and casting ominous shadows on the ground. The clearing the man had mentioned might be real, or it could be a trap. Every second she stayed felt like a gamble she couldn't afford to lose. "You said there's a road ahead," Sarah said carefully, her voice steady despite the fear clawing at her throat. "How far is it?" The man smirked, his eyes narrowing. "Not far. But you'll need my help to find it." Sarah's grip on the leash tightened, her free hand inching toward the branch she'd used earlier to fan the smoke. It wasn't much of a weapon, but it was better than nothing. She didn't trust this man, not for a second, but the fire left her with no easy choices. "I'll take my chances," she said firmly, her eyes locking onto his. The man's smirk disappeared, replaced by a cold, calculating expression. "You're making a mistake," he said, stepping closer. "Out here, you won't last without someone who knows the terrain." Bella barked sharply, snapping at the air in front of him. The man flinched but didn't back away. His confidence only made Sarah more uneasy. It was as if he knew something she didn't, something that gave him the upper hand. A loud crack behind her made Sarah jump. The fire had reached the edge of the creek bed, and another tree had collapsed, sending a shower of sparks into the air. The heat was unbearable now, the smoke thick and choking. Sarah knew she was running out of time. "Move," the man demanded, his voice hard. "You don't have time to play hero with your dogs. Either you come with me, or you all burn." Sarah's heart pounded as she stared at him, torn between fear and determination. She didn't trust him, but the fire was closing in fast, and the puppies were too small to survive the smoke much longer. Every second felt like an eternity as she weighed her options. Then, in the distance, she heard it, a faint sound, almost drowned out by the roar of the fire. It was the unmistakable hum of a helicopter. Rescue. Relief flooded her chest, but it was quickly replaced by dread. The man heard it too. His eyes darted toward the sound, and his jaw tightened. "We need to move. Now," he said, but this time his voice was laced with urgency, not for her safety, but for something else entirely. Sarah realized with a sinking feeling that he wasn't just another lost hiker. He wasn't here by accident. The pieces fell into place: his strange appearance, his lies about the injury, his insistence on leading her somewhere else. He was hiding from something, or someone. The helicopter's hum grew louder, cutting through the smoke. Sarah glanced at Bella, who was still growling, her stance unwavering. If they could reach an open space, the rescue team might see them. But the man seemed to sense her plan. "You think they'll find you," he said, his voice low and dangerous. "Out here, you're just another in the fire. You'll never make it in time." Sarah swallowed hard, her mind racing. She couldn't let him control the situation, not when they were so close to being saved. The fire was closing in, the smoke thickening with every breath. She had to make a choice, and fast. "Stay back," she warned, lifting the branch defensively. Bella barked again, her sharp cries echoing through the haze. The man paused, his eyes narrowing as he assessed her resolve. "You don't know what you're doing," he said, his tone shifting to something almost pleading. "You don't understand what's at stake." But Sarah wasn't listening anymore. She took a deep breath, her chest burning from the smoke, and turned toward the sound of the helicopter. If she could just get to the clearing, if she could just hold on a little longer, there was still a chance. Behind her, she heard the man curse under his breath, his footsteps crunching on the dried creek bed as he followed. The fire roared louder, the smoke swirling like a living thing, but Sarah didn't stop. She couldn't. Every step brought her closer to the edge of the unknown, and the fight of her life. The smoke seemed to thicken with every step, swirling like a heavy curtain determined to block Sarah's way. Bella stayed close, her growls steady, her sharp barks cutting through the chaos. The puppies whimpered softly, their tiny bodies pressed against Sarah's legs as she urged them forward. The hum of the helicopter was closer now, a fragile lifeline in a sea of fire, but Sarah couldn't shake the sense that danger was closing in faster than the flames. The man was right behind her. His footsteps were hurried but deliberate, his presence an anchor of unease pulling at her every move. "You're going to get yourself killed," he called out, his voice rising above the crackling fire. "And them too." Sarah didn't respond. She couldn't afford to let him distract her. The clearing had to be close. If she could just reach it, the rescue team might see her. But as she pushed forward, the ground beneath her shifted. The dried creek bed gave way to uneven terrain, rocks sliding under her feet. She stumbled, catching herself just in time, but the man seized the moment to close the distance. He grabbed her arm, his grip firm but not yet violent. "Stop running," he said, his voice tight with frustration. "You're making this harder than it needs to be." Bella erupted, barking ferociously, her teeth snapping as she lunged at him. The man jumped back, startled, and Sarah used the distraction to pull free. Her heart was racing now, fear and adrenaline coursing through her veins as she turned to face him. "Stay away," she said, her voice firm despite the tremble in her hands. "I don't know who you are or what you want, but I'm not going with you." For a moment, the man seemed to consider his next move. Then his expression darkened. "You think you're going to outrun this fire? You think that helicopter is going to save you?" He shook his head, a grim smile creeping across his face. "They're not here for you. They're looking for me." Sarah's stomach dropped. The weight of his words hit her like a punch, knocking the air from her lungs. He wasn't just some lost hiker. He was running from something, or someone, and now she was caught in the middle of it. "Why?" she demanded, her voice rising despite the smoke burning her throat. "Why are they after you?" The man hesitated, his eyes darting to the sky as the helicopter's hum grew louder. "It doesn't matter," he said finally, his tone cold. "What matters is that they can't find me. And if they see you with me, He didn't finish the sentence, but the implication was clear. Sarah's mind raced, her options narrowing by the second. She couldn't let him drag her into whatever mess he was involved in, but the fire was closing in, the puppies were growing weaker, and the clearing was still nowhere in sight. She glanced down at Bella, whose fierce loyalty was the only thing keeping the man at bay. "Move," he ordered, his patience clearly wearing thin. Before Sarah could react, a loud crack split the air, and a burning branch crashed to the ground between them, sending sparks flying. The man staggered back, shielding his face, while Sarah seized the moment to scoop up the smallest puppy and run. Bella barked wildly, her paws skidding on the loose ground as she kept pace with Sarah. The smoke thickened again, swallowing everything in its path. Sarah's lungs burned, her legs ached, but she pushed forward, driven by sheer willpower and the faint hope of rescue. The helicopter was closer now, its sound almost deafening, but it was still invisible behind the wall of smoke. And then she saw it, a faint flicker of light ahead. The clearing. Relief surged through her, but it was quickly tempered by the realization that the man wasn't far behind. She could hear him coughing and stumbling, his determination as relentless as the fire itself. As she burst into the clearing, Sarah's heart leapt. The helicopter hovered just above, its searchlight cutting through the smoke like a beacon. She waved her arms frantically, shouting for help, her voice hoarse and raw. Bella barked beside her, her cries echoing through the chaos. But before the helicopter could descend, the man emerged from the smoke, his face twisted with desperation. He wasn't going to let her go, not without a fight. The pilot seemed to hesitate, the searchlight sweeping between Sarah and the man. The fire roared around them, the heat unbearable, and Sarah knew she was out of time. She clutched the puppies tightly, her mind racing for a plan, as the man stepped closer, his intentions clear. "You're not leaving without me," he said, his voice low and dangerous. Sarah stared at him, her heart pounding. She had no idea what he was capable of, but she knew one thing: she would fight for her life, and for the lives of the innocent creatures she had sworn to protect. The helicopter hovered above, its searchlight fixed on the two of them, as the fire raged on, drawing them both closer to the edge of no return. The roar of the helicopter grew deafening as it hovered lower, the searchlight illuminating the clearing and casting long, shifting shadows across the smoke-filled ground. Sarah stood her ground, clutching the puppies close, her breath coming in ragged gasps. Bella remained at her side, her teeth bared and ready to defend. The man stopped just a few feet away, his face twisted with desperation and something darker, fear. "Don't be stupid," he barked, his voice harsh but shaky. "They won't take you without me. You're putting yourself and those dogs in danger." Sarah ignored him, her focus locked on the helicopter above. She waved her free arm frantically, her voice hoarse as she screamed for help. The searchlight shifted, centering on her, and she saw a figure lean out, gesturing for her to stay where she was. Relief washed over her, but it was fleeting. The man lunged suddenly, grabbing at her arm in a final, desperate attempt to take control. Sarah stumbled, almost losing her grip on the smallest puppy, but Bella reacted instantly. She leapt at the man, her sharp bark turning into a snarl as she forced him to step back. The helicopter's loudspeaker blared, breaking through the chaos. "Stay where you are. Help is coming." The man froze, his eyes darting toward the helicopter, then back to Sarah. For a moment, his face betrayed the full weight of his panic. He wasn't just running from rescue, he was running from something much bigger. Sarah's heart pounded as she watched him, her mind racing. Was he a fugitive? A wanted criminal? The thought sent a fresh wave of fear coursing through her. The man's desperation wasn't just about survival, it was about avoiding capture at all costs. "Please," he said, his voice softer now, almost pleading. "You don't understand. If they take me, I'm done. Just say I'm with you. Just..." Before he could finish, a sudden gust of wind swept through the clearing, fanning the flames and sending embers flying. The fire surged closer, a wall of heat and smoke driving them all to the edge of the clearing. The helicopter lowered further, and a rescue worker descended on a harness, shouting instructions that were barely audible over the roar. "Get back," the worker yelled, motioning toward the fire as he landed near Sarah. She hesitated, torn between the relief of rescue and the threat of the man beside her. The worker's eyes shifted to him, narrowing with recognition. "You! Stay where you are." The man bolted. He darted toward the trees, his figure disappearing into the smoke. The worker shouted into his radio, calling for backup, but Sarah knew the fire was too close. She could still hear the man's coughing, fading into the distance as the flames swallowed his escape route. The rescue worker turned to Sarah, urgency in his voice. "We need to go. Now." He helped her secure the puppies in a sling, then motioned for her to hold tight as they were lifted toward the helicopter. Bella was hoisted up next, her loyal eyes never leaving Sarah. As they ascended, the full scope of the fire became clear. The forest below was a sea of flames, the smoke rising in thick, black plumes. Sarah's chest tightened as she thought of the man, his figure swallowed by the inferno. Despite everything, a pang of guilt tugged at her. She didn't even know his name. Once aboard, Sarah held the puppies close, her hands trembling as the rescue worker checked her for injuries. Bella rested her head on Sarah's lap, her body exhausted but her spirit unbroken. The helicopter banked sharply, moving away from the fire, and Sarah let out a breath she hadn't realized she was holding. But just as the relief began to sink in, the radio crackled. "We've picked up movement near the perimeter," a voice said. "It's him." Sarah's eyes widened as she looked at the rescue worker. His expression was grim as he turned toward the window, scanning the ground below. The man had survived, somehow evading both the flames and the rescue team. As the helicopter flew into the smoky horizon, Sarah felt a strange mix of emotions, relief for her survival, gratitude for Bella's loyalty, and a lingering unease about the man and the secrets he carried. One thing was certain, the fire may have spared her life, but its scars, both seen and unseen, would stay with her forever. And somewhere out there, amidst the ashes, a man was still running, his story unfinished. The helicopter flew over the smoky horizon, the fire below shrinking into a distant orange glow. Sarah leaned back against the cold interior, her arms still wrapped tightly around the puppies. Their small, fragile breaths reassured her they were safe, even as her mind replayed the events of the day in vivid flashes. Bella lay at her feet, her ears twitching but her eyes closed, finally allowing herself to rest. The rescue worker sat beside Sarah, his voice breaking the silence. "You did well out there. Most people wouldn't have made it this far, let alone with these little ones." His words carried an unexpected warmth, but Sarah only managed a weak smile in response. Her thoughts drifted back to the man. She didn't know what his story was or why he had been so desperate, but his face haunted her. She remembered the fear in his eyes and the strange mix of guilt and determination in his voice. He wasn't just running from the fire, he was running from something much larger. But what? As the helicopter touched down at a temporary rescue site, Sarah was met by volunteers who rushed to check on her and the puppies. The relief in their faces was evident as they gently took the pups to provide them with water and care. Bella stayed close to Sarah, refusing to leave her side even as a vet checked her over. The worker from the helicopter approached again, holding a bottle of water and a blanket. "We got confirmation," he said, his tone measured. "The man you saw. He's been wanted for a while. Escaped custody a few days ago. We think the fire trapped him in the forest, just like you." Sarah swallowed hard, the weight of his words settling in. It made sense now, his desperation, his willingness to endanger her to secure his own escape. "Did they find him?" she asked hesitantly, unsure if she even wanted to know the answer. The worker hesitated before shaking his head. "Not yet. The fire spread too quickly. But they'll keep searching." His gaze softened. "You don't need to worry about him anymore. You're safe now." Safe. The word felt strange, almost foreign, after everything she'd been through. But as Sarah looked around at the bustling rescue camp, the rows of tents filled with supplies and the calm efficiency of people working together, she felt a small flicker of peace. In the days that followed, Sarah stayed at the rescue site, regaining her strength and helping the puppies recover. They were stronger now, playful and curious despite the ordeal they had endured. Bella, ever the protector, kept a watchful eye on them, her loyalty unwavering. News of Sarah's rescue spread quickly, and soon reporters arrived, eager to hear her story. She shared the part she felt comfortable with, focusing on the determination it took to survive and the bond she shared with Bella and the puppies. She didn't mention the man or his ominous warning, it felt too personal, too raw to share with strangers. As the fire was finally brought under control, Sarah returned home, carrying with her the scars of the experience but also a newfound resilience. She kept the puppies, each one a reminder of the strength and love that had kept her going when everything seemed lost. Bella remained her constant companion, her fierce loyalty a source of comfort in the quieter days that followed. But even as life began to settle, Sarah couldn't shake the memory of the man. She often wondered if he had survived, if he had managed to escape the fire or if his fate had been sealed by the choices he had made. She would likely never know the answer, but she found herself hoping that, wherever he was, he had found some kind of peace. In the end, Sarah realized, survival wasn't just about escaping danger, it was about finding the strength to move forward, to rebuild and grow even in the face of fear and uncertainty. The fire had taken so much, but it had also revealed something unshakable within her. And as she watched the puppies chase each other across the yard, their laughter like yips filling the air, she felt something she hadn't in a long time, hope.